Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity.
An oven and a half is what we have today for BIM Thoughts. We're joined by Dana DeFilippi, Carl the Storm, and Mark Dietrick. Hello, Mark.
Hi, guys. How are ya?
Fantastic.
Good. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, Mark, define yourself.
Define myself.
Yeah.
I'm Mark Dietrick. I'm Director of Services with Case Technologies out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have offices as well in the DC area and Florida. I've been with Case for about 12 years now. And we are an Autodesk reseller, but I'm on the services side, so not so much on the software side. I'm more on the services side of things. I'm an architect by background, registered in Pennsylvania, though haven't practiced in quite some time. Spent the majority of my career with the large international architectural engineering firm, Burt Hill, who many of you probably know. Got acquired by Stantec. I was there for about 24 years. And I was the Chief Information Officer as well as Director of Research for many years. So a little bit about my background. Also in education as well. I teach adjunct professor at University of Pittsburgh. And so that's a little bit about me.
Wow. So what's the new trends going on these days?
We get involved in pretty much all different technologies, primarily revolving around building information modeling and reality computing. A lot of reality computing these days. I think almost everybody now, or at least most significant projects, retrofit projects, are doing reality computing as opposed to traditional surveying. So we're pretty heavily involved in that as well. And then, we've kind of spun that whole practice off into what we call digital historic preservation. That's been a lot of fun, and I know you've actually had Paul. You talked about Aben earlier, but I know you've had Paul on your podcast before, speaking about the project we're doing in Volterra, Italy. But that was actually a project started by me through the Volterra Detroit Foundation. I was a founding member of the foundation that was it's loosely affiliated with my alma mater, which is University of Detroit Mercy. And
cool.
And we formed the foundation about 12 years ago to establish a residential college in Volterra. And so we have done that. We run traditional study abroad programs out of the school. And then we do workshops like the one Paul spoke to you about previously. But so that's been really interesting, the applying reality computing to digitally preserve historic architecture. That's been a real fun new adventure for me.
I bet you've learned so much from that project. Yeah, it's one thing just reading the manuals and trying it out and doing the demos, but it's another thing to actually take it out in the field.
And that's really how it all started. So it was about 5 years ago, and Case Technologies, my company, we were just starting to get involved in that technology. And then, because of my affiliation with the Volterra Detroit Foundation, we had this opportunity. We're looking for ideas to do workshops out of the school there. And myself and the president of the foundation, who's a good friend of mine, Vladek Fuchs, we said, wow, this is a great place to test out new technologies and capture these amazing and very important historic structures. And we have a really good relationship with the city over there and the archaeologists. So we have access to sites that are sometimes difficult to get access to. And we also have access to their research. And our data goes to them to fuel their research. So it has been an amazing journey. We had no idea where it was going to go. Can't believe it's still going on. we thought it was basically kind of a one and done, but it just kind of grew, to this yearly thing. And some of us even go over more than once a year. So yeah, been fascinating, and that's what got me involved in the project that I believe you wanted to talk to me about today too, because we weren't able to go to Volterra last year.
Yeah, I
Because,
wonder why.
yeah, right. And so was looking for an opportunity to do something here in the States that was similar, and that's how that project got started.
So where did you go?
So we went to Brownsville, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour south of Pittsburgh,
Uh-huh.
and a small, impoverished community, classic Rust Belt city
Mm-hmm.
that was thriving back in the day when the steel industry was cranking out here in Pittsburgh. And they're kind of right between on the southern edge of the steel production and then the northern edge of the coal and iron ore production. And so they were a very important city, very thriving, back in the early 1900s. And when the industries went downhill, it suffered the fate like many Rust Belt cities did and became very impoverished, and lots of wonderful buildings that just are abandoned and in various stages of disrepair. Some that are actually literally falling apart and needing to be demolished. Some that are wonderful historic structures. It actually has the third oldest castle in the United States. So
Really?
fun fact for your podcast. It's called Nemacolin Castle. It was an early trading post back in the 1800s. It's operating as a museum, so it's in really good shape. But then most of the other buildings in the heart of downtown are pretty much boarded up and abandoned. And another really good structure, the Union train station, was it was on a major train line, the city, and so that train station was a wonderful building, and it's in pretty decent shape, although it hasn't been occupied since the early, what was it, 1990s, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
when it was abandoned. And so yeah, really good friend of mine and colleague. We worked together at Burt Hill, Laura Patterson. She's from the area down there, and she she's a landscape architect, but way beyond that, she's an artist as well. She's very active in urban planning and master planning, etc., and just has a really big heart for the communities down there of trying to enact change. Well, she became acquaintances with another person from Brownsville. His name's Joe Barantovich. And Joe, a longtime resident of Brownsville, and basically got tired of, just the blight, and said, well, what can I do to make things happen? What can I do myself
Mm-hmm.
personally to make things change? And he said, I can plant flowers. And and so that's what he did. He started planting flowers, and beyond that as well, he did cleanup projects, things like that. And had a lot of the community embrace that and get behind him for that. And that's where he ran into Laura. Said, "Hey, you're a landscape architect. You could certainly help me plant flowers, pick the right kind of flowers."
Right.
So they established, a partnership, and so Joe founded what's called the Perennial Project, and that's how it started. And it's grown into this much bigger thing that's engaging the community at many different levels to try to get things to change, and try to bring improvement to this blighted community. And so Laura was visiting my office maybe a couple years ago, and I was showing her some of the things we were doing in Volterra, Italy. And I said, how would you like to stand on the stage of the Roman theater, first century BC Roman theater in Volterra, virtually? So gave her the headset. And, she was able to look at our scan data, which was in situ, and we were able to show it to her through a VR platform, and she was kind of blown away by that. And I saw the wheels turning in her head, once she experienced that. And so she immediately signed up to come with us to Volterra. And of course, that got canceled, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
When it got canceled and the wheels turning in her head, said, "Okay, let's do this in Brownsville." Same idea in Brownsville. Let's capture, let's digitally preserve some of these buildings, some which cannot be with the community much longer. They're just beyond a state of being rehabilitated. But we'd love to preserve the memory of those buildings. They're very important to the long-term residents of the community. They're very iconic and symbolic of their history and heritage. So to have this digital remembrance of the buildings was very intriguing. So that was one aspect of what we did. And then, of course, the buildings that were more stable and more important, like I mentioned, the Union Station and the castle, Nemacolin Castle. We also digitized those and created, for the Union Station, we created a digital reconstruction of what it would have been like in the 40s, basically in its heyday. So we took the scan data, and of course, scan data was, it's a lot of the building is boarded up and it's missing a lot of the components of the building. So we had to obviously interpret from historic information, documentation, photos, etc., what it would have looked like back in the 40s. And so we completed a digital reconstruction of it. And then we developed a program with the high school to engage the high school students in basically a STEAM curriculum: science, technology, engineering, art, and math. But I like to say we added an H to that, the historic component. But we basically built a curriculum for the high school students, and we conducted a special class where they were able to use the digital information and then also study the history of the building, including interviewing residents who actually were in the building, and were able to tell them stories about their experiences of the building. And then the students learned some gaming technology and told these stories virtually, using the gaming platform with the digital reconstruction. So it was really very, very interesting project. I think it turned out fantastic. The story, you can actually see one of the final stories on our website, the Perennial Project website, rather. And, it's a story about a long-term resident who had a memory of taking the train to the amusement park in Pittsburgh, which was called Kennywood. And so basically the whole city would shut down on Kennywood Day, and everybody would go to the train station, take the train to the amusement park together as a community. And then, obviously at the end of the day, you take the train back. So just a really cool, kind of heartwarming story of this amazing history of the city. So to me, it's just really intriguing being able to capture those memories in this new way, in this virtual way, so that they'll be with us forever. Really interesting to me. And also then for the students who weren't able to experience that building. They weren't able to experience they're able to experience the amusement park. It's still there, but they weren't able to experience, going as a whole community and gathering on the train and, going together and traveling there and back. I think that starts to spark their interest in the city, the interest in the history of the city, and hopefully start to think about what the community could be again. And I think that's one of the big ideas that we're trying to drive here as well.
So I've actually been to Kennywood, being a DC
Awesome.
resident and having some friends and family from that area. And I mean, being in Kennywood, which is actually owned by Paramount Parks, so it's a huge park, but it feels very small town. right? Like when you're there, you feel like you are part of the community in some way. Even talking about it with people, it's like, oh, I've been to Kennywood. It's like, what? You've been to Kennywood? I grew up going there. Like you get this kind of like you're part of the community feeling. So I can only imagine what Kennywood Day would have been like. That just sounds like so fantastic.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And the park itself is very historic. It's got several historic landmarks in the park. So yeah, that's cool that you were there. I really,
Yeah, not since I was a very little girl. I'm sure I would appreciate it more, especially the landmark sake of it.
yeah,
Going now.
you should check it out again, and definitely check out our video. I think you'd enjoy that.
Yes, I see Norma on
Yes.
on the page there, and I am very excited to look into that because I see the Kennywood Adventure with Norma. I want to go to Kennywood with Norma.
That's right.
I just looked up because, in Brownsville, there's a Union Station, and it's like, where isn't there a Union Station, right? So I just
Isn't
looked
that
it up,
true?
and on Wikipedia, there's actually 140 pages on Union stations in the United States.
Yeah.
That's bizarre to me. Like, why aren't we more unique with our naming?
The name, isn't it? Yeah, that's a good question. I never thought about that, but that's very true.
But no, I think that's such a wonderful thing that I think 3D scanning has the ability to do. And I think even capturing it as it is today. I mean, I think we take that for granted almost and thinking about that in terms of Norma. You know, our children or our children's children are going to be able to look at these laser scans as a moment in time, almost kind of like a time capsule.
That's absolutely true. And what's really interesting is while we were scanning the Union Station, right next to it, there's like 4 or 5 buildings that were again abandoned, boarded up. We're like, well, we're here. Let's go ahead and just scan down the street. We'll get some context, etc. And literally within a month of us finishing scan data, one of the buildings started to drop bricks into the street. A month after that, they were demolished. Those 4 buildings had to be demolished. So luckily we did, right? So we scanned them. We had the facades. So we were able to take the scan data. We did a really nice mesh model, textured mesh model from the scan data. And now we have it available in augmented reality. So you can literally put the buildings back virtually while you're standing on the street through a mobile app. So, I think that goes to what you're saying there, Dana, is that now we have them captured. We have the memory of them digitally preserved, and we can put them back on the site virtually if we want to. We can hopefully start to create some online galleries. So we're going to be looking into doing that as well. One of the other things we did is some of the more iconic architectural artifacts from those buildings were salvaged. So we were able to get up really close to them, column capitals and cornice pieces and, chunks of friezes, things like that. And we were able to do some really high-res photogrammetry models of these artifacts. It's funny, somehow they got the name doodads. For the non-technical folks, they were the building doodads.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, right. So we've got those captured again, hoping to do an online gallery of those. But those are the sorts of things that become really iconic to people and triggers their memory of these buildings, which is fantastic. As an architect, you love to hear things like that from the community. Well, these buildings were important to us. They have entrenched in our memory, and they're very iconic. And so then one of the other thoughts we have is to take these digital prototypes of the doodads and look at potentially fabricating from the digital prototype pieces of artwork, perhaps that some abstractions of these iconic elements that can then become placed in the city parks. And where these buildings were torn down is becoming a park right in the heart of the city. So I think would be another natural use for the scan data, the reality capture data, and something we're going to definitely be looking into as well.
the story about the data, the capture data. I saw the video about the train ride from Union Station through to Kennywood on the Perennial Project website. As you mentioned, we've had Paul on before talking about the similar project that you guys have done in Voltaire. But we are a BIM podcast. We are a technical podcast, so I would be remiss if I didn't ask a little bit about the technology side. What type of equipment and processes did you use to capture that data, that reality, capture that reality or computer that's part of that heartwarming experience that we get from the website?
Right. Yeah. So we are a partner with Leica Geosystems case. So we did use the Leica laser scanning technology, the RTC 360 is the unit that we used to do the laser scanning capture. Using primarily the Leica software to do registration. And then the modeling was actually done, our modeler was using SketchUp to do the historic recreation. So he was able to, interestingly enough, he wasn't comfortable working directly from the point cloud data. So we actually were able to extract from the Leica Register 360 software orthogonal plans, elevations, and sections to scale imagery from the point cloud to AutoCAD. So we actually used 2D to scale imagery. That was his desired workflow, and he loved it. Right, so he was able to get everything he needed from that to do the reconstruction, and again, obviously needing to use photos as well to fill in the missing pieces. And then we started the project with the students was started in Unreal, so Epic's gaming engine. And because we had to work remotely with the students because of the pandemic, primarily remotely, there was a lot of challenges. Unreal is a pretty hefty learning curve. And I think because we couldn't be there in person, we felt pretty early on that it was a bit of a stretch. So we backed down to Twinmotion, which is built on the Unreal platform, but a much more simplified interface. And so that's what we did is we backed down and conducted the class through Twinmotion. So they were able to bring the model into Twinmotion and, bring the train in and get it moving, bring people in, get them moving around and, do some of the camera motions and so forth to tell the story. So similar concepts, a little bit easier to enact in that platform. Our hope is to continue with the classes and start teaching them the Unreal Engine part of it so they can be a little bit more interactive with the stories that they're telling.
And that was going to be my next question. You answered it nicely. Is this something that's going to continue? So it sounds like it is. This is the idea, especially the STEAM part of the classes is something that you guys are hoping to continue.
Absolutely. Yeah, we really hope to continue that. Always looking for grant money. So that's the big thing with this. But STEAM educational initiatives are big now. So there's definitely grant money available. There's also, we're going to be applying for an Epic mega grant as well. So, hopefully we'll be able to, continue to fund this thing and continue forward because we really believe it's a great idea. It's engaged the community. That's the part that's been really heartwarming to me is to see how it's really engaged the community at many different levels, at the high school level, which is great. And then also, all the way through the community up to, people like Norma, who told the story. And, when it was cool. When she experienced the Union Station in VR, she was just blown away. And she said, it's exactly like I remember it. And we heard that from a lot of people who were able to experience the building firsthand. We actually showed the VR at the county fair. So that was interesting, right? So we're in a tent at the county fair, pretty much beside the pig race track that was outside. You talk about a strange juxtaposition, right? So we've got the VR going inside, we've got the pig races outside, but it was really cool, and to see people's reaction, to hear their reaction, hearing things like, "Yeah, this is exactly like I remember it," and like I can almost remember the sounds and the smells of being in the building. It's really heartwarming to hear those types of stories, and I think that's great. I think that's part of making this change happen is getting the community engaged, getting people excited about the opportunities, the ability to start to positively influence the community into change. I think that's how things get started, and hopefully we'll make a big difference in the long run. And we really hope that we'll also attract potential developers. So we're able to show this building as it was, and it would be a great building to restore. We could easily see, a mixed use facility being there where, you might have some loft apartments and some, retail down below, and it could be absolutely remarkable. Who knows with, the pandemic driving a lot of people away from the big cities and the ability to work remotely, a city like Brownsville could become attractive to people.
Yeah.
So, you just never know where it's going to go. Oh, one other component that failed to mention, educational component of our project that relates to this story is we engaged civil and environmental engineering students at the University of Pittsburgh, where I mentioned I teach. And we had them use the Union Station as a capstone project. So they do these capstone senior projects, and they basically they look for projects that are real and that are local, so the students can really get engaged, and they team up students, and they almost they form like a company, if you will, to do a project, right? And in this class, so they studied the Union Station building. They were able to use our scan data. They also went on site and did some structural analysis. They verified the structural capacity of the building and verified that it is very sound and can actually support 2 more floors. And they did a structural design for that expansion. And and then also did a little report on what it might take to start to clean up the building, to start to get it into repair. So obviously this is a student project. It's not engineering data, but it is at least something where again could help to attract a developer and say, well, think about what this could be. And that would be certainly a home run if that would happen.
Absolutely, it's like the proof of concept has already been done, and I think a lot of people would when you hear that, the idea, it starts the ball rolling, as you said. So sometimes the biggest step is that first one, and projects like this where you get the students and the town together and we do these little things and it all sort of steamrolls. I can absolutely see sort of your vision, especially after seeing the video of the Union Station, um, how this might come to play and how it could become something. So maybe somebody out there listening to BIM Thoughts today wants to help out, which is a great segment to my next question, Mark. If someone listening wants to volunteer, wants to donate, but wants to get involved somehow, how can they do that?
Oh, that's the beautiful thing, is that this is a lot of opportunities to get engaged. That's right. So, if you're local around the area, there's always some types of projects going on, cleanup projects. As I mentioned, flower planting projects. You'll see on the website, there's like little pop-up parks, things happening across the community. Those sorts of things, easy to get engaged there. Obviously, financially, people can contribute. You can go to the website and contribute there as well. And then just submitting ideas too for the community, things that we can think about, how we might take some of these things we've started and extend them forward. We're always looking for good ideas. And so that there's many different ways, and the best way would be to, head to the Perennial Project website, and there's an online form that you can fill out related to that.
What if somebody wanted to do this in their own community?
Another great question, and I think it's really this is a program that would be really easy to replicate. Um, when we started it, we weren't quite sure where it was going to go. When Laura had me come down and do some initial scans and present them to the city, and show them in VR, we were like, "Yeah, this is cool." And, we had a bunch of things swimming in our heads, and it took us a while to really think through what this could become, and and it became some of the things we talked about today. But I think that can be done in any number of communities. To anybody that's really wants to capture that history, be able to communicate that history in interesting ways. The educational component, I think, is key, right? Being able to wrap this around an educational component, both from just engaging the younger members of the community, as well as potential funding sources, is a big part of it. But I think we've developed a pretty good roadmap, I think, of how this could be done in any number of different communities.
Mm-hmm. Right, because you just can't go to the city or the historical society and say, "Hey, look, I've 3D captured your whole town as it sits today," and they're like, "Yeah, but I can go out and look at that right now. What is that going to do for me?" It doesn't really tell the story like what you were talking about, where you remodel the buildings, and more importantly, interview some of the residents there that have been there for a long time, that have seen those old buildings, to share their experiences and give that oral history. I think that's the key, I think, if you want to replicate this project.
I agree with you. Yeah, that's why I made a big point of saying it's not just STEAM education program. We added the H to it, the history to it.
Right.
Well, speaking of history, and maybe as a final thought here, in the early 20th century, many railroad companies used different stations, and typically they took on the name of the company themselves. Hence, Penn Station for the old Pennsylvania Railroad. If various railroads combined and used the same depot, this place often took the name Union Station. Hence, there being so many.
Well, there you go.
There's a fact of the day.
Fact of the day.
Mystery solved. I like it.
Carl, Dana, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was fun talking to you guys.
What a great episode. Thank you so much.